We live in a world that praises emotional sensitivity, but rarely teaches emotional sovereignty. From childhood, we're taught to monitor other people's reactions, to seek approval, to adjust ourselves to avoid conflict, to avoid pain. But what if the real path to freedom isn't found in being loved by everyone, but in not being owned by their opinions? Most people think suffering is something the world does to them. But suffering isn't just an experience, it's an interpretation. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." What if the criticism that stings the most isn't an attack, but a mirror? What if the reason we feel so hurt isn't because someone said something cruel, but because something inside us agreed with them? Pain becomes unbearable only when we resist it, and we resist because we think we shouldn't feel it. But here's the truth. Discomfort is the first signal of growth. It's the body's way of saying, this story, this reaction, this identity, it's too small for you now. Most of us react without thinking. Someone criticizes us, and we immediately feel wounded. Someone ignores us, and we spiral into insecurity. These aren't conscious choices, they're programmed responses, automatic scripts written by old wounds, and unless we rewrite them, they'll run our lives. True emotional strength isn't coldness. It's not pretending we don't care. It's feeling everything and still choosing not to be ruled by it. It's not indifference. It's strategic neutrality. It's the calm that comes from understanding. I don't need to control what you think. I only need to master how I respond. And that's where the real power lies. Your peace begins the moment you stop outsourcing your worth. If you need validation to feel whole, then you've given the world a remote control to your self-esteem. And trust me, people will press every button. So how do we change? How do we build that emotional muscle that lets us face criticism, pain, even loss, and not collapse? It begins with observing your inner reactions like a scientist, not judging them, not fighting them, just witnessing. You hear a negative comment. Pause. Where did your body react? Was it your chest, your stomach, your throat? What thought followed it? Was it shame, anger, fear? And most importantly, what old story did it confirm? I'm not good enough. They're right. No one sees me. These stories weren't written today. They were written years ago. And now, every new comment is just adding another page. The practice is not about never reacting. The practice is about slowing the reaction so you can reprogram it. You're not trying to become a robot. You're trying to become conscious. Conscious of your patterns. Conscious of your wounds. Conscious of your power. This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Many people think they're cursed, when in truth they're just unaware of how their inner narratives shape their outer world. Now let's talk about resistance. Most suffering doesn't come from pain itself. It comes from resisting the pain. Imagine holding a beach ball underwater. The more you try to keep it submerged, the more force it uses to pop back up. That's what we do with our emotions. We suppress anger, we deny sadness, we fake confidence, and then we wonder why we explode, shut down, or collapse. Pain isn't the enemy, denial is. Because denial disconnects us from our inner truth. And when we're disconnected, we become easy to control. We become people pleasers, approval addicts, victims. But here's the liberation. You can feel pain and not become it. You can observe fear and not obey it. You can hear criticism and not internalize it. And this capacity, this separation between feeling and identity, is the foundation of mental fortitude. When you create space between stimulus and response, you're no longer a slave to the past. You become the author of the present. One of the most powerful practices to begin this shift is journaling. Not just about what happened, but about what you felt, why it hurt, and what belief it activated. Over time, you begin to see the repetition. You realize that 90% of your emotional responses are recycled, and that insight is everything. Because if it's recycled, it can be rewritten. Another practice is strategic indifference. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop bleeding for every opinion. You learn to distinguish between feedback and projection, between truth and manipulation, between your voice and the voice of old pain speaking through others. And finally, you need a declaration, a personal statement that anchors you in moments of chaos. Something simple, something real. I choose to respond, not react. I will not let fear write my story. I am not what they say. I am what I choose to become. Say it every day. Write it. Speak it. Own it. Because transformation isn't a one-time breakthrough. It's a daily commitment. You don't become strong by lifting once. You become strong by lifting every time life throws weight at you and still rising. Your identity is not your reaction. Your worth is not their opinion. Your strength is not in how loud you scream, but in how still you can be when the world tries to shake you. So remember this. Every criticism, every painful moment, every emotional storm, it's not here to destroy you. It's here to reveal you. Not the you that was programmed by wounds, but the you that's been buried beneath them. Let the suffering come, but don't let it stay. Let it teach you, let it shape you, let it pass. Because you, not the world, are the gatekeeper of your peace. Have you ever noticed how quickly we turn against ourselves? One small failure, one criticism, one moment of rejection, and suddenly we're spiraling. I'm not good enough. They probably hate me. Why do I even try? This isn't just negative thinking. It's internalized judgment, a habit of mistaking emotional pain for personal truth. But let's be clear, just because something feels true doesn't mean it is. Emotion is not evidence. We often confuse the intensity of our emotions with the accuracy of our thoughts. If it hurts, we think it must be real. But pain only tells you that something touched a nerve, not that the story you're telling yourself is correct. Think of it this way. You stub your toe on a chair. It hurts like hell. But you don't suddenly conclude you're a failure or unlovable. Yet when someone criticizes your idea or doesn't call you back, that same pain gets translated into identity. I'm not worth it. Why? Because we've trained ourselves to believe that rejection equals truth. But that belief was likely born in childhood, when a parent was cold, or a teacher dismissed you, or friends excluded you, and no one explained that their behavior wasn't a reflection of your value. So your nervous system adapted. It learned to expect pain and to take it personally. Over time, pain became the proof that you're broken. But this is the lie we must challenge if we want emotional freedom. Here's what most people miss. Healing doesn't mean you stop feeling pain. It means you stop building your identity around it. It means you can feel the ache of being misunderstood and not spiral into shame. It means someone can disappoint you, and you don't automatically assume it's your fault. This is where maturity begins, when you realize that not every emotional wound requires a personal conclusion. Let's talk about projection. Carl Jung explained projection as the act of placing our own unconscious contents onto others. In simpler terms, when someone criticizes you harshly, it often reveals more about them than you. But the reverse is also true. When someone's words cut too deeply, it usually reveals something unresolved within you. So when we feel intense emotional pain in response to others, the question isn't what's wrong with them, it's what's still unhealed in me. This is why reactions are sacred. They are messengers from the unconscious. They point to our blind spots. If we're willing to look, every trigger becomes a teacher. Every insult becomes an invitation to see where we're still giving our power away. And that is the beginning of sovereignty, when you no longer beg the world to treat you right, because you've already learned how to treat yourself right. Now let's dig deeper. Why do we need approval? Why do we panic when someone disapproves of us? It's not because we're weak, it's because we've mistaken belonging for survival. For most of human history, rejection meant death. Being cast out of the tribe meant starvation, danger, loneliness. And though the world has changed, our biology hasn't. So when someone criticizes us or withdraws, our nervous system still reacts like we're about to be left behind in the forest. It's primal, but it's not permanent. You can rewire that response, but it requires repetition, awareness, compassion. You don't heal by shaming yourself for reacting. You heal by noticing the reaction, holding it gently and choosing differently, over and over again. Until one day, someone says something cruel, and your first thought isn't, "What's wrong with me?" But that's not mine to carry. And that moment, that break in the chain, is how freedom begins. Let's introduce a new practice, emotional audits. At the end of each day, take 5 minutes to ask yourself, when did I feel hurt today? What was said or done? What did I make it mean? Is that story actually true? What would I say to a child who believed that? This simple exercise can unearth the unconscious stories running your emotional life, and once they're visible, they lose their power. Another essential tool is boundaries, not the walls we build out of fear, but the standards we uphold from self-respect. A boundary is simply this: what I will and will not accept, not because I'm angry, but because I love myself. When you stop explaining your worth, stop arguing with every critic, stop proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim the energy that was always yours. That energy becomes your fire, your fuel, your foundation. We need to stop asking, why don't they like me? And start asking, why am I trying so hard to earn what I already deserve? You don't need to convince anyone of your value. You just need to stop forgetting it yourself. That is the heart of emotional independence. When your worth is no longer up for debate, your peace is no longer up for grabs. Imagine your life like a house. Every opinion that enters it is like a guest. Some guests bring flowers, others bring trash. Emotional maturity is knowing which guests to let in and which to politely refuse at the door. You are not obligated to entertain every judgment, every opinion, every projection. Your inner space is sacred. Guard it. And remember, every painful emotion is a doorway. Behind it is a message, a lesson. A hidden truth about what you still believe about yourself. When you walk through that door with courage and curiosity, you don't just reduce your suffering, you reclaim your power. And that power is not loud. It's not aggressive. It's quiet, grounded, unshakable. It's the knowing that no matter what happens out there, you are stable in here. So next time you feel rejected, criticized, ignored, don't rush to escape it. Pause. Breathe. Ask, what is this moment here to teach me? That question, simple as it seems, can break the spell of suffering. Because suffering isn't the pain. Suffering is the refusal to understand it. You don't need to become someone else to be enough. You just need to remember who you were before the world told you otherwise. Every time you feel hurt by someone's words, pause. Not to suppress the emotion, but to observe it. That split second before your automatic reaction holds the key to emotional freedom. Most people live their lives like echo chambers of childhood wounds, responding to the present with the emotions of the past. A sarcastic remark from a colleague doesn't just sting because of its content, it stings because it touches something unresolved inside you. And this is where the transformation begins, not by changing others, but by becoming radically conscious of how you respond. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Most suffering isn't what happens to us, but the meaning we attach to it. And that meaning is often a projection of fear, of shame, of a need to be seen or validated. When we become aware of these inner processes, we unlock a power far greater than control. We unlock understanding. The modern world teaches us to optimize everything except our inner lives. We schedule meetings, track habits, and measure sleep. But how often do we track our own emotional patterns? How often do we notice that we become defensive only with certain types of people, or that we shut down in specific situations, even when no threat is present? These aren't random behaviors. They're emotional signatures, evidence of old programs running in the background. Your nervous system remembers. And unless you intervene consciously, it will react as if you're still stuck in that unresolved past. Becoming emotionally independent doesn't mean becoming indifferent. It means becoming selective. Selective in what you internalize, in what you accept as truth, in what you allow to define you. And that kind of selectivity is not arrogance, it's self-respect. If you constantly seek reassurance, approval, or recognition from the outside world, you will always remain emotionally fragile. Because every compliment becomes a necessity, every criticism becomes a wound, every silence becomes abandonment. That's not emotional life, that's emotional captivity. And here's the paradox. The more you try to control what others think of you, the less control you have over your own inner peace. Real stability begins when you stop chasing it externally. You no longer live by the weather of other people's moods. You begin to live by your own emotional climate, a climate you cultivate daily, with awareness, with reflection, and with courage. Here's a powerful practice. Once a day, write down the strongest emotional reaction you had. Not the event, but your reaction to it. Then ask yourself, was this reaction about now or about something older? You'll be surprised how often the body keeps score of what the mind has forgotten. And in that gap between awareness and reaction, you get to rewire. You get to update the story, not from a place of blame, but from a place of responsibility. Because responsibility doesn't mean fault, it means power. Power to choose a different response. Power to free yourself from recycled suffering. Most of our pain is recycled. That's the truth. We relive arguments from years ago in new relationships. We punish ourselves for mistakes long after everyone else has moved on. We carry shame that was never ours to begin with. The path out isn't forgetting, it's remembering consciously, so we can release. Emotional independence is not about becoming numb, it's about becoming precise. Precise about who you are, what you feel, and why. When you get clear on those things, you stop needing other people to validate your existence. You become your own mirror, and that mirror doesn't distort. Imagine a version of yourself that no longer flinches when someone disapproves of you, that no longer spirals when plans fall apart, that no longer craves explanation for why someone ghosted, betrayed, or misunderstood you. That version of you is not fantasy, it's forged. Forged through daily moments of awareness, through the willingness to sit with discomfort, and through the radical act of self-trust. Because that's what this is all about, learning to trust yourself again. Trust your interpretations, trust your decisions, trust your process, and above all, trust that even if the whole world misunderstands you, you still know who you are. That is the bedrock of emotional independence. And don't be surprised if this new version of you makes others uncomfortable. Not everyone benefits from your growth. Some people depend on your insecurities to feel superior. Others rely on your silence to avoid their own accountability. And when you stop playing the role, they might resist. Let them. Your growth is not an attack. It's a departure from dysfunction, from emotional slavery, from the illusion that you need permission to be whole. You don't. You never did. You were just taught to forget. So the next time you feel triggered, don't just ask, why did this hurt me? Ask instead, what is this showing me about where I still need healing? That question shifts you from victimhood to authorship. And in that shift, you begin to reclaim everything that was outsourced. Your peace, your worth, your emotional narrative. Remember, the world is loud, but your healing doesn't need to be. Sometimes the quiet decision to no longer take things personally is the loudest revolution of all. There will come a moment, maybe it already has, when you realize that not every emotional storm deserves your full attention. Not every conflict is a battlefield. Not every opinion needs a counter-argument. And not every feeling should dictate your reality. This is not detachment. This is mastery. Emotional mastery doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you no longer become the feeling. You observe it, acknowledge it, and then decide whether it aligns with the truth you want to live by. That's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Imagine experiencing anger, but not becoming angry. Feeling fear without being ruled by it. Not because you suppress it, but because you've built a center strong enough to contain it. That's what we're aiming for, a center that doesn't collapse every time life shakes the ground. You don't need to prove your pain to be valid. You don't need to justify your boundaries to deserve respect. You don't need to win every debate to be right with yourself. These are illusions sold to us by an emotionally reactive world. A world that confuses loudness with strength, reactivity with authenticity, and drama with depth. But there's a deeper truth. Stillness can be more powerful than noise. Silence can be louder than protest. And choosing not to engage in a fight is not weakness. It's wisdom. Especially when that fight pulls you away from your values, your peace, and your growth. There's a strange thing that happens when you stop reacting the way people expect you to. They get confused, unsettled, maybe even hostile. Because your new way of being disrupts the old contract, spoken or unspoken, that said you'd always respond in predictable ways. You'd always shrink when criticized, always justify when doubted, always apologize when challenged. But not anymore. Growth is the quiet refusal to reenact old patterns. It's the invisible decision to let others feel what they feel without making it your job to manage it. That's not coldness. That's clarity. And here's something to remember. Your triggers are not your fault, but they are your responsibility. You didn't choose the wounds. but you do choose whether to carry them forward unresolved into every new chapter of your life. Emotional independence begins when you stop outsourcing your inner peace to people who never asked to hold it. No one else can regulate your inner world like you can. And the more you expect them to, the more disappointed you'll be. Because people are inconsistent. They have their own wounds, projections, and limits. If your peace depends on their validation, you're building a house on sand. So build your house on something firmer, on presence, on principle, on practice. Practice means you won't always get it right. You'll still get triggered. You'll still feel the sting of criticism, the ache of rejection, the fear of abandonment. But over time, you won't collapse under it. You'll bend, breathe, process, and move forward. That's resilience. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of process. A process that no longer depends on being understood, but on being aligned. Aligned with your values, your vision, and your inner peace. Here's a technique you can start today. The emotional check-in. 3 times a day, stop and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Not what you think, not what's happening outside, but what you're feeling. Give it a name. Locate it in the body. Then ask, is this mine, or is this borrowed from someone else's mood, words, or energy? That simple practice can stop you from absorbing what isn't yours. It's like emotional hygiene, cleansing your inner world of unnecessary clutter. Because the truth is, much of what we carry emotionally was never meant for us to hold. And unless we check in, we carry it anyway. One more thing. Be gentle with yourself in this process. You're unlearning decades of conditioning. You're rewiring a nervous system that's been programmed to react, defend, and please. Emotional independence isn't a one-time achievement. It's a daily choice. Some days you'll get pulled back into the old patterns. That's okay. Awareness always comes before change. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. And every time you pause instead of react, every time you reflect instead of lash out, every time you soothe yourself instead of demand others do it, you're winning a quiet revolution inside you. This revolution isn't loud, it's not glamorous, it won't go viral, but it will change your life. Because the day you stop needing the world to be soft to feel safe is the day you become free. Not because the world stopped being harsh, but because you stopped letting it shape who you are. That's not just emotional independence, that's emotional leadership. And it starts with the smallest, most radical act, choosing to respond with awareness instead of reacting from pain. You might be familiar with the idea that people can only hurt you if you allow them to. But there's a deeper truth to this. People can only trigger your pain if it's still unresolved within you. The real question isn't whether someone's words or actions hurt. The real question is, why do those words or actions still affect you? The way we respond to others is a reflection of how we relate to ourselves. And until we address the wounds within, no amount of external validation, apology, or change will ever bring true peace. This is where emotional independence starts, when you no longer let others' behavior dictate your emotional state. It's easy to say, I won't let this person hurt me, but the truth is, the hurt exists because it's already in you. Your work then becomes finding out why it's there, why it still holds power, and how you can release it. And the release isn't about forgetting or denying the pain. It's about recognizing that the emotional charge you carry is yours to heal. No one can fix you. No one can validate your worth unless you've already done that work yourself. The people who trigger you the most are often mirrors reflecting parts of yourself that still need attention. But here's the thing. They aren't the cause. They're the catalyst. When you truly begin to understand this, the way you see criticism changes. No longer is it a personal attack. It's an opportunity for growth. It's feedback, not about your worth, but about the areas where you have room to evolve. This shift is monumental. Instead of sinking into defensiveness or feeling wounded, you can ask yourself, what is it in me that this is touching? And what can I do to heal it? This isn't about self-blame, it's about self-awareness. It's the difference between reacting from a place of hurt and responding from a place of clarity. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Once you start healing these inner wounds, once you become aware of the patterns that have been running your emotional life, the external world starts to lose its grip on you. The opinions of others lose their power, the judgments fade into the background, You realize that you're no longer living for validation, for approval, or for praise. You begin to live for something deeper, alignment with your true self. And when you are aligned with who you truly are, the external world, no matter how chaotic, cannot sway you as easily. But let's be clear, this doesn't happen overnight. Emotional independence is a muscle that has to be built over time. It's like learning to swim. In the beginning, it feels awkward. You'll find yourself flailing, feeling overwhelmed, and thinking that it's easier just to float along and let the current take you. But as you continue to practice, you gain strength. You learn how to float with ease. You learn how to control your movements and ride the waves, rather than letting them drown you. And even once you've reached a level of mastery, the waves still come. Life still presents challenges. People will still criticize. Situations will still trigger your emotions. But what changes is how you handle it. You learn to stay grounded. You learn to stay calm. You learn that pain isn't permanent, that emotions are fleeting, and that your power lies in how you respond to them. That's emotional independence, not being untouched by the world, but being able to move through it without losing your center. So as you go about your life, pay attention to the moments when you feel that old rush of anger, fear, or sadness. Instead of immediately reacting, pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, what is this really about? What part of me still needs healing? And then when you're ready, respond from your highest self, not from your wounds. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Each time you do this, you're rewiring your response mechanisms. Each time you choose awareness over reactivity, you strengthen your emotional independence. And remember, this is your journey. No one else can walk it for you. Others may walk beside you, but the healing, the growth, the evolution, it's all up to you. And when you take that responsibility, you step into a new world. A world where you're not at the mercy of the ups and downs of life. A world where you are the creator of your inner peace. And that world, it's yours to build. Emotional independence is not about rejecting emotions. It's about understanding them, feeling them, and choosing how to respond. It's about owning your emotional experience instead of being owned by it. Life has its ups and downs, and people will always have their opinions, but emotional independence means that none of these external factors dictate how you feel or how you act. It gives you the power to choose your emotional responses instead of reacting automatically to the world around you. When you develop emotional independence, you create a space where your emotional well-being doesn't depend on the actions of others. It's about knowing who you are, regardless of what others say or do. This doesn't mean that you don't feel hurt or frustration when someone criticizes you or when things don't go as planned. It means you don't let those feelings control you or lead to negative self-judgment. Instead, you can acknowledge those feelings, feel them, and then choose how you want to move forward. One of the key aspects of emotional independence is developing a deep sense of self-awareness. This means being able to observe your thoughts, feelings, and reactions without judgment. Self-awareness is the foundation of emotional control. Once you can see your emotions for what they are, just thoughts and sensations passing through you, you can start to decide how you want to respond. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or pretending they don't exist. It means acknowledging them without letting them dictate your actions or mood. When you are emotionally independent, you learn to respond, not react. Reacting is automatic. It's driven by old patterns, fears, and unconscious beliefs. But responding is conscious. It's rooted in mindfulness and understanding. You recognize that your initial reaction might be fear, anger, or sadness, but you choose to act from a place of calm and clarity instead of those emotions. This is a powerful shift in perspective and can lead to greater emotional resilience. Another key element of emotional independence is self-validation. You stop looking to others for approval or affirmation. Instead, you give yourself the validation you need. This doesn't mean you don't appreciate compliments or constructive feedback, but it means that your self-worth doesn't depend on external sources. You begin to trust your own inner voice and rely on your own judgment. This is where true confidence comes from, when you are confident in yourself, not because of what others think of you, but because you know who you are and what you stand for. It's also important to remember that emotional independence isn't about isolation or detaching from the world. It's about creating healthy emotional boundaries. It's about being able to stay true to yourself, no matter what others do or say. You can still be empathetic and compassionate, but you don't allow others' emotions to dictate your own. You learn how to show up for others without losing yourself in the process. Developing emotional independence is an ongoing process. It requires patience and practice. It's not something that happens overnight, but every step you take towards self-awareness, self-validation, and emotional control brings you closer to a more peaceful and fulfilling life. It allows you to respond to the challenges and emotions that arise, instead of being a slave to them. So how do you begin to cultivate this emotional independence? Start by practicing mindfulness and self-reflection. When you feel triggered by someone or something, take a moment to pause and observe your emotions. Notice what you're feeling and why. Is it fear, frustration, sadness, or something else? Ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What part of me still needs healing? This simple practice can help you create space between the stimulus and your reaction, allowing you to choose how to respond rather than reacting impulsively. Another practice is self-validation. When you find yourself seeking approval from others, remind yourself that your worth is not dependent on others' opinions. You are worthy simply because you exist. Take time every day to affirm your value, your strengths, and the progress you've made. This doesn't mean ignoring feedback or being arrogant, but it means recognizing your intrinsic value regardless of external validation. Finally, remember that emotional independence is not about perfection. You will still have moments of insecurity, doubt, and vulnerability. But when you cultivate emotional independence, you have the tools to navigate those moments with grace. You learn to weather the storms of life without letting them define who you are. You learn to stay grounded in your own sense of self, no matter what happens around you. In conclusion, emotional independence is a journey, not a destination. It's about learning to trust yourself, to validate your own feelings, and to choose your emotional responses consciously. It's about living a life that is not dictated by the opinions, actions, or moods of others. It's about finding peace within yourself, no matter what is happening around you. And when you do, you create a life of emotional freedom and inner strength. When you begin to detach from the need for external approval, something profound happens. You start hearing your own voice more clearly. Most people live surrounded by noise, the expectations of others, the judgments of society, the comparisons fed by social media. That noise becomes so constant that they mistake it for their own thoughts. But when you consciously choose to turn inward, to listen to the subtle whispers of your inner self, you begin to reclaim your power. This is where emotional sovereignty is born, not from rebellion, but from deep alignment. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a temple. Every thought, every emotion, every reaction is a visitor. Some visitors are kind, others are critical, some are echoes of the past. Emotional independence means you become the guardian of that temple. You choose which voices stay and which are shown the door. You decide who speaks the loudest. This is not repression, it's discernment. And discernment is a sign of maturity. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become that if your identity is constantly shaped by the projections of others? Many people never reach this privilege because they remain addicted to being liked, to being validated, to fitting in. Emotional independence invites you to break this addiction. It calls you to face the fear of disapproval and walk through it. Because beyond that fear is something far greater: authenticity. True freedom isn't doing whatever you want without consequences. It's knowing what's truly yours, your values, your beliefs, your emotions, and living by them, regardless of external pressure. It means you can walk into a room where no one understands you and still feel secure. It means you can hear criticism, even unfair criticism, and not crumble. You may feel pain, but you don't lose your center. You don't lose yourself. One of the most powerful exercises for strengthening emotional independence is to observe your emotional triggers without immediately acting on them. For example, when someone disrespects you, the instinct might be to argue or withdraw. But instead, pause. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this moment? Is this really about them, or is this touching something old inside me? Often, the pain we feel isn't about the present situation, it's a resurfacing of unresolved wounds. By identifying the root of the emotion, you can respond from wisdom, not from trauma. Another vital practice is emotional journaling. Each day, spend 5 minutes writing about your emotional experiences. What made you react? What made you feel small? What brought you peace? Don't censor yourself. Over time, this habit will reveal patterns. You'll start to see what triggers your need for validation, or what situations lead you to abandon yourself to please others. Awareness is the first step toward mastery. It's also essential to build what I call an inner circle of trust. These are a few people, maybe even just 1 or 2, who see you, respect you, and reflect your growth. You don't need a crowd. You need resonance. Having a strong connection with even a single person who honors your emotional independence can be a powerful support on this journey. But remember, the foundation of your emotional world must be built by you, not borrowed from others. Let's talk about criticism, because that's where most people lose their emotional independence. Criticism stings because it often taps into hidden insecurities. But here's the truth. Criticism only hurts when there's already a wound. If someone tells you the sky is green and you know it's blue, you won't be offended. But if someone says you're lazy and deep down you fear that might be true, it hits hard. That's why emotional independence demands inner healing. When you've faced your shadows, criticism loses its power. It becomes data, not a dagger. You can even use criticism as a mirror. Ask yourself, is there truth in this? Even a fragment? If yes, grow. If not, let it go. Emotional maturity means you're willing to change when it serves your higher self. But you don't change just to keep the peace or avoid discomfort. You become loyal to your growth, not your ego. The more emotionally independent you become, the more you'll notice a strange paradox. You become more compassionate. When you no longer need others to be a certain way to feel okay, you start accepting them as they are. You stop trying to fix people, to win them over, to control how they see you. You realize that everyone is on their own journey, and their perception of you says more about them than it does about you. And finally, emotional independence allows you to suffer wisely. Because let's be honest, suffering is inevitable. But when you are emotionally free, suffering no longer defines you. You experience it, learn from it, and move through it without building your identity around it. You don't become the one who was betrayed, or the one who failed. You simply become someone who lived, who learned, who grew. This is the essence of emotional sovereignty, feeling deeply, loving bravely, and standing firmly in your truth, no matter what. When you've reached this point, when you've been able to sit alone with yourself and not be afraid of the silence, this is no longer just the end of a video. This is a new level of your life. Because the path we talked about today, it's not abstract theory, and it's not motivational talk. It's an inner challenge, an invitation to accept that pain is not your enemy, but your teacher. That emotions are not weakness, but a doorway. That your reactions are not what control you. They are what you have the power to transform. And if you heard this, if at any moment you felt something in these words resonate within you, then you've already begun the path to freedom. To that kind of freedom where you no longer have to be convenient for others, where you no longer seek permission to be yourself, where even when it hurts, you still know why you keep walking. In a world where everyone's racing to appear happy, you chose the path of depth. And for that, thank you. Not for me, for yourself, because you had the courage to look within. You chose truth, and truth, even when it hurts, always sets you free. If this video spoke to you, you know what to do. Share it, say what you felt, support those who are on this path too, because we are not alone. We are the people learning to live as our true selves, and that alone is a powerful thing. See you in the next video, and remember, you are more than you think, deeper than you see, stronger than you've ever felt.